Good evening. My name is Lewis, and I'm an alcoholic. And it's real good to be here tonight. Came up from Dallas and was greeted by some folks. It's just as, you know, they tell us in Texas that New Yorkers are cold, and I haven't found that as of yet. In Texas, they told me to say that through God's grace and folks just like you, I haven't had a drink since September the 5th, 1975, and for that I'm truly, truly grateful. You know? I'd like for you to meet my wife. Earlene, would you stand up? Tomorrow we're going to New York, and we're going to celebrate our 45th wedding anniversary. Well, we haven't been married that long, but you know, everybody says the 45th is so great. The hell, we might as well get it. We might get divorced pretty soon, you know. But we have been married 37 years, and she's still jealous, you know. We were flying up on American in an airplane. That's why I kind of fly these days. And we were sitting in a seat in the middle and one next to the window, and a beautiful lady in a micro mini dress came in, and she sat down and she began to swing her leg, and Earlene checked her out, and of course I didn't even look at her. But Earlene checked her out, and she hunched me in a minute. And she said, "Lewis, that woman has her wedding band on the wrong finger." And I didn't say anything. I wasn't watching that much. I didn't say anything. And Earlene hunched me again, and she said, "Tell her she's got it on the wrong finger." And I said, "I can't tell that woman that." And she said, "Tell her." And I said, "Why don't you tell her?" And so Earlene looked at her and said, "Honey," and the lady said, "Yes, dear." And she said, I'm sorry, but you've got your wedding band on the wrong finger." The lady just swung her legs 2 or 3 times, licked her lips, looked me in the face, and she told Earlene, "I know, my dear, I married the wrong man." You know? I had my first drink at the senior prom in Wagner, Oklahoma. I didn't have but 2 drinks, 2 half glasses of homemade beer. In Oklahoma, we called it chalk. Did real good. First time I could dance, sing. First time I was ever considered a full human being was that night at the prom. You know, I didn't have but 2. Went home, had the best night's sleep I ever had. But I got up the next morning praying to God, if you don't let Mama find out, I'll never do it again. If you don't let my high school principal find out, I'll never do it again. I want to describe my first drunk, which was 2 weeks later at the picnic. And Earlene started square dancing with some little boy. And I didn't stop at 2 half drinks. That day I got drunk, threw up on Earlene's dress, and started a fight between 2 other people. You know, and that's my whole drunk-a-log. I like to share. I like to share with you my last drunk. Every morning I would get in my car to go to work, and somehow my car would head to the liquor store. And I bought 12 half a pints of vodka. And I stopped back by the drugstore, and I got 25 Seconols. And I came back home, and I drank half a pint of vodka, and I took 70 milligrams of Valium. They sent them to you in the mail then. I went up to my office, and I went up to Church's Fried Chicken, and I got 2 wings, 1 pepper, and 2 rolls. I came back home, I ate the wings, the pepper, and the rolls. Then I took 200 milligrams of Seconal and drank the other half a pint of vodka, and I'd pass out. And I'd do that every 4 hours for about 2 weeks until I'd start passing blood from my mouth and my rectum. And then I'd go up to my office and get a great big bottle of Demerol, and I'd come home and I'd give myself Demerol shots every 4 hours and pass out until the bleeding stopped and the pain stopped. And then I would finish my drunk off, usually another week or 2 until they would put me in the hospital for detox. I did that the last 18, 19 months of my drinking, ladies and gentlemen. I've been in every hospital in Dallas, but never for alcoholism. Always pneumonia. One fool put me in for a brain tumor, You know, well, in August of '75, Earlene decided to take the kids home. We're both from the same hometown, Wagner, Oklahoma. I don't know if y'all know where that is, but I'll explain it to you a little later. Well, Earlene took the kids home for before school started, and Earlene had been hinting that I could have a little problem with alcohol. And I had been taking her family's inventory, you know, and I decided to show this lovely child of God that while she was gone, I could quit drinking. On the third day, I fell in the shower and I broke both of my shoulders. I had a major concussion. My blood sugar went up to greater than 500. My blood pressure greater than 300 over 150. And when I hit my head, I had a concussion, so I lost my gag reflex. And I was lying in the middle of the den almost to drown on my own vomit, you know, when two gangsters came by. They wanted me to write them a prescription for Dilaudid so they could go sell it and get some heroin. And I'll always be grateful to gangsters because they saved my life that day. You know, I'm invited all over the country to talk, and sometimes my head gets a little big and I don't need the airplane to fly home, you know. But when I do, I always have to remember those two gangsters, those dirty, no good gangster junkies that kicked my door down and saved my life. You know, stayed in the hospital a month. You know, alcohol did so much to me. The only thing at that time I had to be proud of was an education. But with alcohol, I was lying with tubes running everywhere. I had 2 casts on my arm. I had on a diaper, and I had a catheter in. You know, alcohol had reduced me to 2 days old. I couldn't even use the restroom. Somebody had to bathe me. Somebody had to wipe me when I went to the restroom. You know, and all the doctors said I would be dead before morning. But, you know, you don't tell us alcoholics that. You know, we prove you wrong every time. You know, when I got out, I had a solemn vow that I'd never drink again. You know, and then 10 days later, I wound up drunk. You know, but I woke up at home, and was I glad to be home, ladies and gentlemen. Earlene was hollering at the kids, getting them ready to go to church, and fussing and arguing, and I woke up and I said, "What's happening, Mama?" And she just kept arguing and fussing and fighting. And I said, "What's going on, Fox?" And she just kept arguing, and this thing was getting a little serious now. Now, if you're an alcoholic like I am, you have so many acts that we go into. So, you know, when this thing's getting tough, I went to my mad act. "What's happening?" And she just, I had to get engaged in a conversation, but she wouldn't talk to me. So I went to my mad act, and she wouldn't talk. And I went to my bad acting, and then too, something else was going on. She was packing this morning, you know, and she usually doesn't do that on Sundays, and I went to my mad act, I went to my bad act, then I went to my happy act, you know, and things were getting tough. I went to my crying act, and she just kept packing. You know, everything was tough, and I had to pull the ace out of the hole this time, ladies and gentlemen. So I went into my sexy act, you know. And I'll be damned, she packed faster. About that time, the phone rang, and it was my brother from Chicago. And my brother said, "Tuffy, Mother told me that you're having some problems, and I'm going to get you sober, you know." And he said, "I want you to come up here and go to treatment." And of course, I told him I didn't have any money, and he sent, you know, cash money to will call. And of course, you know, that delayed my trip a little. You know, the next time he sent a ticket, and an unrefundable ticket, and I was an hour late for the plane. The plane was an hour and a half late, you know. Now, I didn't get on the plane and say any prayers to Jesus to get me sober. Matter of fact, I had 18 drinks between Dallas and Chicago. The best 18 drinks I ever had, because I got so drunk it scared my brother so much that he took me straight to the hospital and he didn't take me home so I could con him out of going in there, you know. Stayed in the hospital, didn't go to any groups, didn't do anything. On the 10th day, the counselor came by and said, "Lewis, let's go to the meeting." I said, "You know, I'm sick, I'm in detox." He said, "No, Lewis, if you don't go to the meeting, we're going to bring the meeting into your room." Of course, I went to the meeting. I hadn't bathed, I hadn't shaved, I hadn't done anything. When I walked into the meeting, everybody gave up and got up and gave me a seat, you know. But you know how God works. It was the right meeting, and they had the right guy talking, because they had a doctor talking, and a doctor is probably the only person I would listen to, you know. And the doctor was talking about alcoholism is a disease, not something bad, dirty, and no good like I thought that it was, see. And he said that I'll never forget his closing. His closing statement was, we're sick, needing to get well, not bad, needing to get good. My program took off. I got off in 26 days. I made a solemn vow to those people I'd go to a meeting the night that I got home. But I caught a later plane, and I got home at midnight. And I was all fired up, but when I walked in my back gate, something happened. All the guilt, all the shame came back. And I stayed in my bedroom 9 days. On the 9th day, I decided to kill myself. And a little voice on the inside said, Lewis, before you kill yourself, why don't you go to AA? Like you promised those folks in Chicago that you would, you know? And I said, well, I'll just get my gun, and after the meeting, I'll kill myself. You don't have to do things perfect now. If I make a promise, you know, I'll just kill myself after the meeting. And so I called AA. I remember the telephone number of AA. That's the only thing I remembered out of the whole treatment. I called AA, and the guy said, Lewis, we're fixing to have a meeting. Come on down. Got in my car to go to the meeting. About halfway there, I thought, oh, my God, this is in a part of town where they don't like African-American folks, you know. And then I thought, said, well, what difference does it make? I said, well, they might string me up to the nearest tree, you know. And then the little boy said, well, hell, you're going to kill yourself anyhow. So what's the difference? When I walked in the meeting, AA is not, AA in 75 is not like it is today with the nice, pretty building. And we didn't have all the ladies there. We men kind of clean up a little when there are ladies come around. This was an old concrete floor with dry dock wall, and we had 2 tables sitting in the middle of the floor, and there was about 20 old hairy-legged men sitting around. But when I walked in, they all stood up, and they all shook my hand, and they looked me directly in the eye, and they said, welcome, Lewis, glad to have you. Welcome, Lewis, glad to have you. Something happened for me that night. I hadn't been welcome anywhere, in so long. But they just said, welcome, glad to have you. Every man shook my hand, looked me in my eye, and told me that. And all of a sudden, I got a sense that I belong somewhere for the first time in my life. I belong somewhere. Well, the second time. You see, I was my grandmother's favorite. I had 6 sisters and 1 brother, but I was her favorite. All my sisters and my brother was popular. They were the smartest kids in school. My brother was singing. He was an athlete, and he was a very brilliant man. But you see, I had to work for everything that I ever had. But I was the spoiled one. I was the next to the last one. And so my grandmother would assign a sister a week to take care of me. And you know how you are when you're spoiled. Everybody hated me. And besides that, I peed in the bed. Now you have to understand, whatever I do, I'm good at. See, you normal wuss stop peeing in the bed at 5. I stopped when I was 14. We were very poor, and we all had to sleep with each other. Well, no one ever slept with me. And I was lonely, and I was alone. Now in Oklahoma, it gets cold, and we had a wooden stove. Now, the fire in the wood stove would go out about 1, and I would pee on myself about 2:30, and I would be cold, and I would be moaning, and my grandmother would say, get up and clean up. I want to clean that bed up. And I would say, no, Mama, I just want to drown in it. I'm dirty, I'm no good. Nobody else pees in the bed but me. And finally, my grandmother would get tired, and she'd get up, and she'd clean me up. And then she'd put me in that nice, warm bed with her, and I would be crying, and she'd hug me close, and she'd say, Lewis, you're not dirty and no good. She said, son, you're just special, and God has something special for you to do. And my grandmother would hug me, and my heart would slow down, and my breathing would slow down, and that sense of ease and comfort would come back, and I would get a sense of belonging, just like that first night I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got that fence that needed. They had all those statements and those dumb steps and everything on the wall. I couldn't even read that crap. The only thing I got out of my first meeting of AA was a feeling that I belonged somewhere, They said go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I went to 120 meetings in 60 days. I got addicted to AA like I'm addicted to everything that makes me feel different, we started halfway houses in minority sections of the city. I just became Mr. AA all over town. And after 5 years, life was back together. I had the Internal Revenue Service on a payback schedule. The kids were inviting their little friends home again. And Earlene and I could ride in the same car for 30 minutes without pulling guns and knives on each other. Life was just back together, and everything was just wonderful and good. And I woke up one morning and I said, life is fine, life is good, I might as well kill myself. How many of y'all are like I am? When everything is going good, you just want to die. But when there's trouble, and I'm balancing, I'm tough. I'm alive, I'm alert. My friends call me a stress junkie. But boy, things were just going good. Called my sponsor. My sponsor said, Lewis, what step are you working on? So I hung up on that sucker. That's what they asked me what step I'm working on. So I called another sponsor. He said, Lewis, what step you on? I hung up on that sucker. I'd had 13 sponsors, by the way. And I finally called my old original sponsor in Chicago, and he said, Lewis, what step are you working on? See, the issue was I never did the steps for myself. I just learned the steps from medicine and from the Bible so I could cross-reference them and impress everybody. It never occurred to me to take the steps because it never occurred to me that I was a real alcoholic. I was just doing this because I got a lot of praise and, everybody rubbing me on the head and telling me how great I was. And boy, you're the only doctor we have in AA. That just got me off, and I never concerned myself. I knew that one day I was going to start drinking back again. And he said, well, Lewis, either you get your book and you come up here, or you go to somebody down there that's not impressed with you being a doctor. And you get a big book, and he take a big book and put a dictionary between you, and y'all do the steps from the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, not your version or his version. And so there was a carpenter by the name of Sam Vest. And I never do this unless I give Sam credit. Sam was a big builder in his head, and I was this big doctor in my head. And, and we'd meet. We'd meet and we'd get our heads together, and Sam would say, Lewis, pop the book open. And I'll never forget that first time. And I popped the book open to chapter 5. And Sam said, well, Lewis, what about the doctor's opinion and the first 4 chapters in the book and Bill's story? I said, well, hell, Sam, I'm a doctor. I've got my own damn opinion. So Sam said, Lewis, what's an alcoholic? I said, that's a person who drinks too much. He said, what's the solution? I said, don't drink. He said, well, Lewis, why are you here? I said, I've got a problem. I'm an alcoholic. He said, Lewis, when the last time you had a drink? I said, 5 years, 2 days, 1 hour, 17 minutes. I could count it down, when that's all you got, you know that stuff, and he said, now, wait a minute, Lewis. He said, now, you tell me you're here because you got a problem, and your problem is alcohol, and the solution to your alcohol problem is not to drink, and you haven't drank in 5 years, and you still got a problem, Ladies and gentlemen, that's the first time I realized that that I had more of a problem than just pouring alcohol and drugs in my mouth, See, I thought that if I were not drinking, that everything was okay, See, I still wanted to burn down the Internal Revenue Service building, Still wanted to kill my mother-in-law on alternate months and my mother on the other ones, I thought that was fine. I'm all right because I'm not drinking, when that guy, and I don't mean to be funny, but when that guy blew up the building in Oklahoma City, there are a lot of nights that I planned on going and blowing up the Internal Revenue Service building, and I'd say, well, what I'll do, I'll kill that agent first, and then I'd have me a drink, And then I said, well, what I'll do, I'll set dynamite around the building, and then I'd have me a drink. And I said, well, where can I buy this dynamite? Well, I'll go get this anarchist cookbook, and then I'd have me a drink. And hell, and by the time I got ready to go, I'd pass out. So I know, what's going on here. And finally, it got through to me that alcohol was more than just my problem, that I had a problem everywhere else. So Sam and I said, well, Lewis, Sam made me turn over to page, I think it's 64 here in this book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it states that though our decision was crucial and it could have little effects on and it says our liquor was but a symptom. So we had to get down to causes and conditions. Our liquor was but a symptom. And he explained it to me like symptoms, kind of like a cold, a fever, and a sneeze. He said, that's what a symptom is. And he said, we got to get down, what is the cause of this problem? And then Sam made me turn to page 62. Now, I have to confess, before page 62, I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. But now, when he turned to 62, I get a little concerned, because here on page 62 he states selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. Now, selfishness to me means thinking everything should go my way. Self-centeredness means thinking that the whole world should evolve around my needs. And then they go on to rub it in on the second paragraph, So our trouble, we think, are basically of our own making, They arise out of, come on, help me with this one, ourselves. And the alcoholic, come on now, is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though we don't usually think so. Now he's getting a little personal here, and I don't like that, then he made me go on over to this next page, and he read this statement about we took stock honestly. Now, you don't call Dr. Deere a liar, you just don't do that. If you say I did it honestly, that must mean sometimes in the past I was dishonest, But first we searched out the flaws in our own makeup, and being convinced that my faults were self-manifested in various ways is what my problem was. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a wonderful mind for rationalization. I had been able to rationalize all of my problems in this world on Earlene, my family, and her family, and it was this book that made me begin to look at myself, And so I finally had to agree with him. I said, well, what's the answer? And he said, you got to have this spiritual experience. And I said, cool, I'm a Baptist, And he said, Lewis, we may not exactly be talking about it like that. He said, what we're talking about, you're going to have to change your thinking, change your feelings, and change your actions. And I said, now, wait a minute. Now, I started off in life in Wagner, Oklahoma, shining shoes. I said, at 28 years of age, they handed me a doctor's degree. I said, I'm a real man, and he said, well, Lewis, let's just look at it, And he said, you're going to have to change your actions. I don't know if any of y'all are like I am, but I'm the kind of person that gets involved in 17 different things at the same time, and guess how many I complete? Not any, But I hold that one piece that nobody else can complete a project unless I'm there, my actions are just bizarre. We went up to Nova Scotia to speak, and when you go to Canada, they let you stay 4 days. And so I was there the fourth day, and they gave us a car to drive up in the mountains and look around while they were at work. And so the guy said, now, Lewis, the one thing that you don't do in Canada is speed. I said, okay. And I'm driving up and down the mountains, nothing to do, and all of a sudden Earlene looked down and I was going 85 miles an hour. And Earlene said, boy, what are you doing? And I said, well, I don't know. She said, where are you going? I said, well, hell, I don't know, but I'm making damn good time. All my life it's been like, I don't know where I'm going, but boy, I'm getting there fast. I only had two kinds of people in the world, those that I loved and those that I thought hated me. And if I loved you, I had to do something for you. And if I thought you hated me, I had to do something to you before you did something to me. So all of my life in my people business, I was performing. performing and loving and performing and hating. Never got close to anybody. Just simply performing all the time, you know? Thinking. My high school principal told me this, and I didn't know what significance it would have, and I really didn't understand it until I was sober about 12 years. He claims that this famous speaker stepped up to the podium to make a speech. He was talking to me about my thinking and how my thinking can free me of the slavery that I was in, and that what a wonderful mind I have. And I think we alcoholics have the greatest minds of any creatures in this world, you know. But it's kind of like he told me this story. He said the guy stepped up and he put a glass of 100 proof vodka on the lectern, and he reached on his inside pocket and he took out an earthworm, and he dropped the earthworm in the glass of vodka, and the earthworm swam a semicircle in the vodka, and he just poof, evaporated. You know, now the earthworm body is similar to the linings of our bodies. And the speaker stepped back and said, now what does that teach you about strong alcohol? A normal person sitting on the front row got up, adjusted his tie, and he said, sir, that teaches us that if you imbibe in strong liquor over a long period of time, it will cause a deterioration of the connective tissue lining of the alimentary canal, therefore predisposing you to ulcers, gastritis, duodenitis, and various other connective tissue illnesses. You know, a drunk in the back of the room stood up and said, that's a lie. That's a damn lie. He said, that teaches us if you drink plenty good vodka, you'll never have worms. In a way, in a way, he's right, ladies and gentlemen. You know, but aren't we masters? Listen, aren't we masters of taking just a little 0.1% of the truth and twisting it and turning it until it becomes 99.9% of the truth? You know, I can tell a lie the first time and I know it's a lie. The second time I tell that same lie, I'm kind of believing it, you know. And the third time I tell that lie, I'll defend it to my death, you know. It's just something about it that's exciting, that I can lie, you know. When the truth would be so simple, it's so nice to lie, you know. And I said, well, and so Sam, I said, well, what do I have to do to change my thinking, my feelings, and my actions? Sam said, Lewis, you got to take the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, all right. And he said, now, Lewis, these steps are simple, and you've been to school a long time, and you're educated, so we're going to have to break them down for you. You know. And I said, fine. He said, we're going to break step 1 down into 2 parts. You know, and ladies and gentlemen, now, I've been to college 21, 22 years. I've been educated far beyond my ability to comprehend. You know, but of all that stuff, you know, of all the stuff they taught me, you know, they couldn't get me sober, you know. Only these 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous got me sober. And I want to share my little deal with you for the little few minutes that I have left. First half, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. You know, my sponsor said, Lewis, now, AA does not waste words. Everything they got there is for a purpose, and it's in a certain place for a particular purpose. He said, why did they put we there first? And of course, I gave him a long definition. He said, no, Lewis, they put it there so that we know who we're talking about. We're not talking about your mama, your sister, the Dallas Police Department. We're talking about you. To admit, he said, that's kind of weak. We or I were, you know, powerless. He said, Lewis, that's a big nebulous word that you fools can play with for days. Take that one out and give me another one. I said, loss of control. He said, all right, over alcohol. He said, the little brown liquid. I said, cool. All right, so now, Lewis, read it for me again. And when I read it the second time, it read, I said that I had lost control over pouring this brown liquid in my mouth, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, that may sound like something small to you. But it took me 5 years to do this. You know, that's un-American. You know, have y'all ever thought about that? You know, we drop bombs on folks' ass. We don't tell them I can't handle it. I'm an American, ladies and gentlemen. You know, you don't say this to me. You know, just whining and whimpy shit. You know, I don't believe in this crap, you know. And then I can't control pouring this little brown liquid in my mouth. That might be, you know, but then when they really got me angry, when he said, and that my life, and he said, Lewis, what does life mean? Of course, I gave him another long definition. He said, Lewis, nobody agrees on what life is. He said, but could we all agree that it is at least what you think, the way you feel, and how you act? I said, that's all right. Had become unmanageable. He said, Lewis, that's another one of those big words that you boys like to play with. I said, how about uncontrollable? I said, all right. And he said, now read it for me again. All right, now I read it, and it says, and my thinking, feelings, and actions, I had lost control over them also. You know, ladies and gentlemen, my commencement speaker in high school said it doesn't matter if you're black, white, blue, green, brown, female, Jewish, or whatever you are. This is America. You can be what you want to be. Hit your wagon to a star. This is America. You know, and I stepped on everybody's toes that got in my way until I got my little degree, you know. And now I come to you, and y'all are telling me that you can't handle it. Yeah, you know, you can't handle it. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, it took me 5 years to take this step. And when I finally took it, my sponsor said, Lewis, at 12 o'clock tonight, I want you to go upstairs, and I want you to take off all your clothes. My sponsor's very histrionic, you know. And he said, I want you to get down on your knees over the commode, and I want you just to ask yourself one question. When was the last time that you had a drink in your body and you were able to guarantee how much you would drink? He said, Lewis, don't complicate it. Just keep it simple. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, it was the second time I had a drink. And all of a sudden, this thing began to make sense to me. Now, just because it made sense, it didn't make me happy. I felt so vulnerable, so alone, so less than when I was able to take step one. Some fools say, well, when you take step two, you'll have some power and you'll begin to have some hope. And I read step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. You know, that is pathetic. You know, you came to believe. You don't. That is the most pathetic grammatical sentence I ever read in my life. You know, how could you write a sentence like this for an upstanding physician and surgeon like me? Bob didn't tell you, but I am an associate professor of psychiatry at our medical school. Now, the only reason I got the job, they needed an alcoholic on staff. But could you just imagine my coming to work one morning and when you walk in, they kind of have greeters, and they all say, good morning, Dr. Deere. And I say, good morning. My voice gets rather deep when I put my white coat on. You know, and they said, well, doctor, we understand you're an alcoholic. I said, that is correct. And we understand that you've been sober around 15 years. That is true. You know, and said, well, doctor, could you tell us how you've been able to stay sober? I can't say, well, I'm just coming to believe. You know, you can't do that. You know. You can't do that. Yeah. And so I ragged on my sponsor so long, he said, Lewis, we're going to break this step down into 3 parts for you. You know? He said, part 1 is came to believe. I was doing this one night, and Al-Anon, my English teacher, pulled me over to the side and said, this sentence has something dangling, and it's supposed to be we, but the we is understood if you've been to school over 15 days. You know? But let's take the first sentence. And by the way, I hated this sentence, but this is a sentence, this is a step that I've come to love. Because this step here is more about psychiatry than anything else. You know, the hot thing in psychiatry is cognitive therapy. And this is what cognitive therapy is, changing your belief system. Came is a verb. Verbs mean what? Action. You know, and my belief system was totally negative, you know. And when I went to old Cease up in Canada, tells a story about negative belief systems and negative thinkers. He said this little Canadian boy would go hunting, playing in the Canadian woods every day, and he'd get lost, and they'd have to send out a search party. One day they went out and got him, and his mom said, now, son, if you go play and you get lost again, I want you to get down on your knees and pray to God, stick your hand out and ask God to lead you out. And so the next day, the little boy went out to play, and of course, he got lost. He got down on his knees and said, oh, Heavenly Father, I'm lost. And he stuck his hand out and said, please lead me out. And about that time, a bird came along, you know, and did number 2 in his hand, you know. He just wiped it out and everything. And I know this boy was the making of an alcoholic. He got back down on his knees. He said, oh, Heavenly Father, He said, great architect of the universe, knower of everything from Alpha to Omega. And he stuck his hand out and he said, don't hand me no shit this time, man. I'm lost. And you see, that's how my whole life was. I thought that everything and everybody was trying to hand me some shit. And when nobody handed me my little cup of shit for that day, I would create my little cup of shit. I'd start early in the morning with Earlene. Even if I had gotten a standing ovation for my nocturnal performance, I'd get up and I'd go to the restroom the next morning. And I'd look in the sink and I'd see it, go to wash my hands, and I'd see that Earlene had left the soap in the sink and it was wet and mushy, and that would start me off. Why does she do this every day? Then I'd reach over for the toothpaste, and I'll be damned if she hasn't been squeezing it in the middle, and you're supposed to squeeze it from the end. Well, if that wasn't cool, I'd sit on my throne. And when the activities had commenced, I would reach for my paper. And I'll just be damned, she'd have it coming off the top, and all of y'all know it's supposed to come off the bottom, And I'd walk out of my bathroom saying nothing, and Earlene would say, what's wrong? Nothing, And I'd turn that tape on, and I'd go all the way back to 20 years, And all of a sudden I was lonely, and I was alone, and I was angry again, But I had to change my thinking. You see, ladies and gentlemen, I've spent 37 years with Earlene. I've been with Earlene twice as long as I was with my mother, And all of those 37 years, I've been trying to change Earlene, trying to get her to think the way I think. And you see, it just can't be done. I'm trying to get her to see things the way I see things. And if y'all are trying to do that, ladies and gentlemen, you might as well forget it, Because unless we have exactly the same brain structure and we're in the same place at the same time all our lives, that's the only way we can see things the same way. We look out here and we think what we see is objective, but in actuality, it's a composition. You see, this eye takes a picture of what we see. This eye takes a picture, and the picture is upside down and diverted. When it comes back to the back of the brain, the image is flipped right side up and then it's turned right side out. It still doesn't mean anything. It then goes to the front of the brain where we have our memory, our reasoning, our cognitive powers, and our judgment. And it's at that time that the picture we see out here is given meaning. Let me share something with you. If anybody should know me, Earlene should. Now, I've known Earlene ever since I was 5 and she was 8. And if anybody should know me, should. Earlene and I got in 1990. We got this wonderful trip. We were going to Paris, France. And we were driving to the airport. And as we were driving by, I looked out the window and I said, "Oh, honey, did you see that beautiful dark gray Lexus?" And she said, "Louis, it was beautiful, 4 doors with the gold rim, but it was light blue." I said, "Oh, no, honey, it was dark gray." She said, "Oh, no, honey, it was light blue." I said, "Oh, no, blank to blank to blank, it was dark gray." She said, "Oh, no, blank to blank to blank to blank, it was light blue." And we didn't speak to each other until we got to New York City, And we had to speak because nobody else would speak to us. Even something as physical as that, how our perceptions differ. Went to Paris, France, walking down the Champs-Élysées, I was strutting, and that was I was the epitome of my life. And a tall, statuesque French lady came by. And she was tall and statuesque, and she was wearing one of those Gloria von Furstenberg dresses, that wraps around and ties in the front. Now, I need to stop here and teach you a little neuroanatomy. Now, there's a part of our brain called a basal ganglia. Now, in this basal ganglia, we have an X-ray or an X-wave. Now, the purpose of this X-wave is to scan the external environment looking for new and unique thrills, Well, as we approach the tall French lady, a gust of wind comes by, and blows the dress open, Now, I didn't look, but probably less than 2 seconds, But trust me on this one, less than 2 seconds. But as when I looked, I noticed she had on long black fishnet stockings, and they were kind of old, double-stitched, old-fashioned taffeta lace. She had on pink panties, with the strips up the stock, and she had, wait a minute, now don't get ahead. She had on and she had on a white garter belt located 16 centimeters below the symphysis pubis, and as I walked by, a warm glow came over me, and I didn't say anything to Earlene. I said to myself, "Thank you, Jesus." And I just walked on down the street. We got down the street about 2 blocks, and Earlene hunched me in the ribs, and she said, "Louis." I said, "Yes, honey." She said, "Did you see that bitch?" And Earlene said she didn't have a slip on. You see, Earlene was taught that once you become a young woman, you don't leave the house without a slip. Earlene wears a slip under her bathing suit. Now, I was taught once you could see something like that it was a art, a thing of beauty and pleasure forever. And you should thank the one you love for it. But we. You just can't see things the same way. And that's what step 2 is about. And all of a sudden it's changed my belief system. My belief system before then was to try to make Earlene see things the way that she sees. My belief system today, and I'm working on it, is try to see things the way Earlene sees them. Because in the final analysis, it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. Because there is no right and wrong. It's only how we see things, ladies and gentlemen. And I used to argue and lose so many friends. But now, if a person just want to be wrong, hell, just let them be wrong. Okay. Could restore us to sanity. And we made a decision to turn my will, my thinking, over to the care of God, this power greater than myself, but as I understand Him, and my action. And that's what I did every day. And all of a sudden, life began to get good for me. How are things today? Life is just outstanding. We have 2 kids. They both have 1 house, 1 car, 1 wife, 1 job, and sometimes I wonder if they're mine. They're doing so good, But life is just. I've been sober 20 years, and life sometimes just not like it looks like it is. I'm involved in everything. 1991, life got so good that Earlene and I kind of paid off everything we owed, and we had our little money put up for retirement. Notice I said had. But there was something missing, ladies and gentlemen. There was an emptiness in me. There was something down there that I just didn't understand, but it just was there, and it was in me. So I decided to go on this cruise of the Mediterranean with these 150 big-time addiction doctors. And I knew that this would make me whole. And second day out, the captain's night, I'm in my tuxedo, and the ladies are in their skitty skirts, and I'm talking as if I'm from the south of England, and a pain hit me in the stomach. And it said, "Boy, what in the hell are you doing here?" And the next 15 to 21 days, by the time I got back to Dallas, I hated everything, and I hated everybody, Within the next 6 months, I gained 40 pounds. I lost all of my hair. And so all my friends decided I needed to go to therapy. So I went to psychoanalysis, and they just taught me why I hated my mama. And then I went to behavioral modification, and they taught me to count 10 before you hate everybody. And then I went to cognitive therapy, and they told me don't think about hating everybody. But whatever I did, I hated everybody. And I just wanted to share with you. And it continued. And about that time, a friend of mine had gone to Egypt, and he came home, and he had a glow on him. And I looked at that glow, and I wanted what he had. I forgot that it was 120 degrees in Egypt, and the boy was just suntan. But he was telling me he went to Egypt, and he found himself. And I said, well, I'm going. You know, and I signed up for a 21-day early in an anthropologic trip. Now, I'm the guy that don't leave town for over 4 days, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so paranoid. You know, but I signed up for a 21-day trip in the desert. God must have had something to do with this. I went with 59 other people, and the only thing they had was that we all had a black belt in sarcasm and hate. You know, after about a week, I couldn't handle it any longer. I just couldn't. If Jesus would have come to us, we'd have said, "What in the hell took you so long?" It was just total sarcasm and total hate. And I withdrew to my room, turned on the TV, and everything was in Egyptian. Went to get a newspaper. They got USA Today on Tuesdays and Fridays, and you had to sign up to get it. I started trying to get old newspapers to read. That we don't have any. Everybody buys them up. And I went back to my room, and the only thing I had was my big book and my 12 and 12, you know. And a little voice on the inside said, "Lewis, why don't you put your anger, hate in the big book?" You know, alcohol is the only thing in life that I couldn't conquer, ladies and gentlemen. And I put alcohol in the big book, and it worked. And the thing said, "Well, why don't you go ahead and put your anger and hate in the big book and see if it'll work for you also." And I'm standing here tonight to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, you know, I did that, and it worked. And in 10 minutes, I'd like to just share with you, you know, how this thing worked for me. You know, the two things in my life that I couldn't control was alcohol, well, 3. Alcohol, Earlene, and hate. You know, and when I put all 3 of them in my book, in my steps, ladies and gentlemen, it worked. You see, I had been asking, why does everybody hate me? And it wasn't until I asked, why do I hate me, that answers began to come. You know, I was taught all my life that only bad people hate. You see, I'm a professional good person. You know, that's one thing that I had going all my life is he's his mama's good boy. He's Lorraine's good boy. Oh, he's a dear. He's one of those good boys. You know, I had to turn it around. So if I decided to dislike you, I had to turn around and say, you hated me. And if you hated me, it's all right for me to hate you back. You see, because good people don't hate, you know. But hate on a continuum is anything from a mild irritation to a murderous rage. And see, my prayers began to change. To God, show me why I hate me. Because what I see in others is really a reflection of what's in me. And within 3 nights, I had this dream about the hunting trip I took with my high school principal. We'd come back to this farmer's house that day, and a little snake ran across. I shot the snake, and I went and got a hoe and chopped the snake's head off. And the farmer said, "Lewis, why did you kill the snake?" I said, "It was a snake." He said, "Why did you kill the snake?" I said, "It's a snake, man." He said, "Why did you kill my snake?" I said, "It's a snake, fool." You know. And he said, "Lewis, snakes, we need them. They kill the rats, which keeps the population in balance." You see, he said, "Lewis, has a snake ever bitten your mama?" "No, father, no, sister, no, brother, no." He said, "Has a snake ever bitten anyone you've ever known?" I said, "No." He said, "Have you ever read about a snake biting a good friend of yours?" I said, "No." You know, he said, "Well, why did you kill the snake?" You know, and I said, "I hate snakes." But in actuality, ladies and gentlemen, I don't hate snakes. I don't even know any snakes. Do you? The problem was I was taught to fear snakes. You know, and it wasn't my hate of snakes, but it was my fear of snakes. And if I fear something, it's all right to attack them, you know. There's a poem from South Pacific that I read that teaches me about where all my fear and hate comes from. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed into your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and of whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you're 5, 6, 7, or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. And ladies and gentlemen, I learned my lesson well. You see, not on the surface. On the surface, I was Miss Alberta's good little boy. But deep down on the inside. You see, my folks are some of the best people in the world, and they love me. I could do no wrong. But my folks taught me to fear. My folks taught me, fear white people, because Oh, remember slavery. That might sound cool, but then they taught me to fear all black people too. They said, now be careful. They divided black people into 3 categories: the very dark skinned ones like me, then the kind of the brown ones, and then the high yellows, And they said, now be careful of those high yellows. They think just like white people. I said, all right, He said, now the dark ones, he said, now you have to watch them. They cheat and they steal. He said, yeah, and they'll rob and they'll rape you. I said, okay. And then these brown ones, he said, you have to be careful because they may go either way. And I used to, until I learned that I'm a citizen of the world, I used to be afraid to say this from the podium. But, I was taught the 3 categories of colors of black people. If you're brown, you can stick around. If you're black, you got to get back. And if you're white, you're all right. And somehow that sunk in with me. And you see, I'm working through that so I can stand here tonight and speak of it freely, because it doesn't control me anymore. Because I know who I am today, But the great lesson is that if I were taught to fear and hate, then I can be taught to replace that with love and caring. It's all up to me. I have a choice, There's a statement in the big book, and I love to read this. There's a principle which is a bar against all information, proof against all argument, and will keep a person in everlasting ignorance. Read it with me. That principle is contempt prior to investigation, You see, I thought I knew about people and everything. See, I grew up in a town of 100 people in my neighborhood, see? And everything I learned was what somebody else told me, what I read in books, or what I saw on TV. But if it was written in a book, let me tell you, it was the gospel. I had to learn at a deep level, ladies and gentlemen, that there are no bad people, only fearful people. I was taught to hate things I fear. If I said I'm afraid, you see, people would think that I was some kind of weak wuss, and they would take advantage of me. So I had to flip it around and turn my fear into hate. My sponsor had me to do a hate inventory, and the conclusion was, all my hate was based on fear, that the person would take away something that I already had, or that he would get something that I wanted and they would run out of, on that law and principle of scarcity. I had to make a decision, ladies and gentlemen. I was at the crossroads, and I hope a lot of y'all are here tonight, and I hope y'all have a desert experience with me, I had to continue to fear and hate and die, or I had to change my perception from fear to caring. I have a choice. You see, I'm the only species that God made that can make a decision. See, hound hate foxes, snakes hate rats, lions hate jackal, dogs hate cat. This hate is instinctive. It's for survival and keep everything balanced. They have no choice. Only God gave us the ability to choose, and today I choose love. Because if I don't, I die spiritually. From the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to stop the hate. And it taught me I had to be a proactive lover on a daily basis. I had to make a decision daily, sometimes hourly, to care for others. I had to ask for forgiveness for myself, and then I had to forgive others. And when I'd harm others, I learned that they had a lesson for me. Nobody's against me. They just have lessons for me. And God gave me a great brain, and I've just got to figure out what is the lesson. But until I grew up, my anger and fear would get in the way, and I would be replaced with hate. I had to start scientific prayer, and that's to go on the inside, to accept whatever's going down on the outside. And I had to develop a heck of a relationship with God, and that's by doing page 86 every day, twice a day in the book Alcoholics Anonymous for at least 6 months is what it took me. I had to make a self-discovery of who I am. Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes explains everything when he says the 2 words of the Lord's Prayer is all you need to know about spirituality. If God is the Father, and we all hold hands tonight and say the Lord's Prayer after this meeting, all of us will say what? Our Father. Nobody will say our stepfather, our uncle, our mother, or anything. We'll all say our Father. If God is the Father and the King, then that means that we are his children, And we are prince and princesses, and we deserve and demand everything that any prince and princesses have, you know. This is what I've been taught. And I had to stop being a victim, you know. You know, I'm a human being. I have choices. The second time anybody messes over me, I had something to do with it, ladies and gentlemen. First time you might con me, but the second time I was trying to get something from you. It's why I let you screw over me. And so I had a little something to do with it. I can't cause anybody to have a bad day. I just let them have it. They want to blame it on me, fine. I began to know at a deep level. You know, if I turn my thinking over to God in the morning, then I can turn the results of my actions over to God at night. And I became free of all my guilt and all my shame as long as I'm practicing the program properly. You know, and I began to use the golden rule. And for y'all of you that are from the East, we began to use karma. You know, I began to try to get out of life what I put in, not get it out and then put something in. You know, it's just, you know, all my life I wanted God, give me what you got, baby, and I'll do something for you later. You know, and then when the rule of karma began to tell me, do something now, and you get out based on what you put in. But you see, all my life, I knew what it took to make me happy. And in the final analysis, I wind up wanting to kill myself. All my life, I thought that something on the outside, other people, places, and things, you know, money, power, and the more I got, the more I wanted, you know? Because I just, you know, just like the guy that owned Mobil Oil Company, they asked him, how much money do you need? He always said, what? Just a little more, you know? Always just a little more. Today I know happiness comes from the inside. And my problem all my life has been loneliness and aloneness. I always performing and never simply being, because I never loved me. Loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness thinking that I'm withdrawing, and aloneness thinking that I'm the only one that thinks like this was my big problem. Today I know to be happy, I don't need anything on the outside of me other than a friend, a soulmate. I went to the dictionary and looked up that term, friend. They have so many definitions of friend in the dictionary. The first one is German, and the word friend means lover. Webster states that a friend are just two people that close together and share. Christ said that a friend is a person that will give up his life for another. And he's talking about we have two lives, you know. One life I live as Dr. Deere, and the other life I live as a real human being, as a member of AA. And what he's saying is you give up that phony, you know, external life, and you let people get to know you at a deep level. But Aristotle had the best term for friendship that I know. And Aristotle said a friend are two people in one soul, two persons so closely together that they actually share on a soul level. You know, I had to learn to be a proactive friend. I had to get things out of my head down to my heart. Science teaches me that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But in emotions, that's not true. The shortest distance is whatever it takes. Bill Wilson first said it, and then I wrote it again, you know. And when I wrote it about a year ago, I called it a new paradigm. But me and Bill said, in the field of emotion, things must go from my head to your heart, and then from your heart to my heart. From my head to your heart, and from your heart to my heart. In other words, I need you. I don't know about any of y'all, but I need you. And the longer I'm sober, the more I need you. You know, I don't think I'm going to ever get enough of you. When you love something, you spend time with it. You care for it. Ever see a boy with a new car? You know, he rubs it, he polishes it, you know. He takes care of the car before he takes care of his new girlfriend, you know. He spends time with it. So if you don't spend time with something, that means that you hate. The greatest tool, the greatest power that I've ever seen was simply to speak to people. You know, it's just, I work at a hospital, and my life is so simple now that one of the greatest thrills I have is to jump on the elevator just before the door closes. You know, I went to the hospital at 6 o'clock one morning about 3 years ago. The elevator was in the basement, and when I got to the elevator, the door was about to close. I let it get a little closer, and then I jumped on, and there was a little lady about 4'8", over in the corner. And of course, when I jumped on, the hospital was deserted, and she just eased over to the side, and of course, under my breath, I said, "Oh, she thinks she's better than I am," and so and so and so and so. But a voice on the inside said, "Good morning," and she said, "Good morning," and I just saw the tension begin to leave her. And I said, "Do you have a loved one here?" I didn't say that. A voice said that for me somewhere. And all of a sudden, she got up straight, and tears began to roll out of her eyes. I was going to 8, and she was going to 6. I'll be damned if she didn't go to 8, and I had to talk to this woman for 30 minutes, But the power of speaking can just neutralize a situation before a minute. I can remember I worked for the prison system in the state of Texas, and death row. We kill a lot of people in Texas. We got an active death row. And there was a story about this guy that was on death row and he killed a guard. What do you think his punishment was after they beat the out of him? Solitary confinement. Nobody spoke to him. Nobody said anything to him. If that is the worst punishment that you can have, is to be ignored, then the best punishment is to be thought of and touched and cared for. At Thanksgiving, last year I was 56 years old, and those questions started again, Why was I born? Why am I living? When I got sober, I think I went from childhood to adulthood and missed my adolescence. And I'm going through adolescence now, Sponsor referred me to this dude named Wayne Dyer, this spiritual writer. And he states that God makes no mistakes. The big book says this too, but Wayne goes on to say that if you really want to know your purpose, go back to when you were born and find out what was going on. I was born in 1938. That was the beginning of what? World War II. And I was reborn in 1975, the ending of what? The Vietnam War. All right? So I was born in times of war. Trust me, I wasn't born to bring war. I believe in my heart that I was born to bring peace. I know that I was born to bring peace. Why am I an alcoholic? It missed all of my family. All my uncles and aunts died of alcoholism on my mother's and father's side, but it missed my mother, father, and all my sisters and brothers. You see, if I'm not an alcoholic, I would not have found AA. If I would have not found AA, I would not have found the 12 steps. And if I had not found the 12 steps, I wouldn't have found this peace within, you see. And if I don't have peace within, I can't give peace without. Because you cannot give away what you don't have, ladies and gentlemen, And if I couldn't give peace without, I couldn't complete my mission in life. And that's to bring peace to the world, one person at a time. A father was trying to put together a picture of the world. And he was struggling with it. His little daughter came up and said, "Daddy, let me help you." And he said, "Get away from me, little girl. I'm a grown man and I can't put this thing together." About that time, his wife called him to do some of those honey-do's on a Saturday. And he got back in 2 hours, and the little girl had the picture halfway put together. And the man said, "Oh, honey, you're so brilliant. You're so smart." She said, "How did you do that?" The little girl said, "Oh, Daddy, it was simple." She said, "All I did was turn the box over, and there was a picture of a man." And she said, "Daddy, I just put the man together, and the rest of the world, what? Fell into place, If we could just put ourselves together, it seems as though the rest of the world will turn into place. I sound real arrogant when I say this, but I believe in my heart that a 12-step program is God's gift to the world, the 20th and the 21st century. And I'm just so proud tonight that God has chosen me as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous to make a steward of these 12 steps. But with stewardship comes an awesome responsibility. The 12 steps are some of the most powerful thinking that you can go through because it can control man's mind, you know. And I'm a steward, and I'm beginning to take my stewardship seriously, ladies and gentlemen. But I have a little prayer at the end of the day that I kind of check my stewardship against. And I kind of go upstairs away from Earlene and everybody, and I kind of get on my knees. I don't take all my clothes off anymore. And I kind of just check myself out. And I go over this prayer, and it goes, is anybody happier because I passed this way? Does anyone remember that I spoke to them today? The day is almost over, and its toiling time is through. Is there anyone to utter now a kindly word or two? Can I say tonight, in parting with the day that's slipping fast, that I helped a single person of the many that I passed? Is a single heart rejoicing over what I did or said? Does the one whose hopes were fading now with courage look ahead? Did I waste the day or use it? Was it well or sorely spent? Did I leave a trail of kindness or a scar of discontent? As I close my eyes in slumber, do I think that God will say, hey, Louis Edward dear, you've got one more tomorrow? Based on what? Your performance of today, you know? Everywhere I look today, ladies and gentlemen, there's violence and hate. TV, radio, personal relationships. I'm a psychiatrist, and everybody I know hates somebody else, you know. Nobody comes in and says, Doctor, I just came by to give you your $150 and tell you I love you, you know. You know. They don't play that shit in Dallas. Now, I don't know about up here, but they don't play that down in Dallas. Everybody's got a problem, you know. They either hate their jobs, they hate the mamas, or they hate their husbands or their wives. Everybody hates somebody, you know. Blacks hate whites, and whites hate blacks, and hell, Hispanics in Dallas hate everybody, you know. Jews hate Muslims, and the Muslims hate the Jews, and the adolescents hate everybody. The young hate the old, the Democrats hate the Republicans, and the adolescents hate everybody. The North hates the South, you know, and the strong hate the weak, and the adolescents hate everybody. Hate had just taken over my entire life, you know, and I had to ask myself, am I going to be a good steward and bring peace to the world one person at a time? Or am I going to be like these 4 people? There once was a very important job to be done, and 4 people were asked to do it. Everybody, somebody, nobody, and anybody. Everybody could do the job that nobody did, that somebody could have done that anybody didn't do. Everybody got mad because nobody did the job that anybody could have done that nobody did. When last seen, these 4 dudes were still arguing, and guess what? The job is still undone. I have to be a proactive lover, ladies and gentlemen. I have to say daily, hourly, I will love, I will love, I will love. In closing, I just want to ask you, would you be my friend? You see. For you see, if I have a friend, and that friend has a friend, and that friend has a friend, we have a network of friendship. And I don't have to be alone. And you see, and if I don't have to be alone, I don't have to fear. And if I don't have to fear, I don't have to hate. And if I don't have to hate, I can be exactly what God created me to be. And that is to love, ladies and gentlemen.